Welcome to an overview of the predefined reports we make available in the Advanced Reporting Engine. And these will be useful for quickly getting to an output and extract of some of the discovered data that is made available after some initial discoveries have completed, whether the initial pass or you've ran some advanced and detailed discovery and you're starting to collect application and detailed information or service connections. So to start, let's go to Reports, Advanced Reporting. And if you've already been here or went through a video about advanced reporting or creating them, you've likely seen some of these before. Now, in our instance, we have quite a few other folders that are user made and can be used as needed for your own custom reports, but each installation is going to have predefined reports here. And these are broken out into a few different use cases that are pretty clear cut as to what they're for. A few recommendations though is our databases. So if you're running the detailed database discovery and you want to pull out information around the Oracle, MS SQL, or even what hosts have Postgres and other databases on them, that is a good option. Then we have our service dependency report, which is going to pull out connections and listener and client and resiliency information for those connections about all the discovered services. So let me go ahead and we'll open those up after we run one of these. So I can select databases here and we'll notice there's an XLS button that opens up, or I can click on run report and that will allow me to view that in the browser or export as other options here. I generally recommend just running as XLS. That is the most easy to use format. I can pull up my report option here. And then of course I'm presented with columns of that data ready to go. So that's just simply running it and you have all that data available to use, which I can then manipulate and filter within Excel as needed if I just want to look for a certain host and use the functionality within Excel. What is important to mention that any of these reports, if you're comfortable enough to modify them, they can all be duplicated and manipulated. So if you like the database report, but you want to also include the device tags within that report, I can go ahead and click on duplicate, and this is going to allow me to modify that. Out of the box, it's not possible to modify our predefined reports. We want these to really stay in a complete state where we know they aren't going to be changed and they're always going to be available to use across every installation. So I'll call this databases with tag, or tags rather, and click OK and create that report. And I'll expand user defined. I'll find that duplicate report here, or I could search for that to get to that a bit quicker if you have many reports like we have here. And then I can go to edit mode. So now that edit functionality is unlocked, I can modify and change those columns as needed, or even change the format and headers or details. Now you'll notice here, these have some set columns that are available. This report was actually created by using DOQL, and that is important to be aware of as well. So this wasn't using the advanced reporting engine where you're selecting categories and fields of data. It's actually using a SQL query specifying that because it's looking at the database model and config information, which is a bit more complex. So if I go to edit this report again, and back to categories here in advanced options, I can then actually see that category name, what we called it here, and an option to click on SQL. And this is actually going to pull out and show the actual SQL that we used to create this report. So I can actually use this SQL within Save DOQL or in the DOQL run window, which we'll talk about in another recording on how this can be modified outside of the reporting engine. But if I want a report available within the advanced reports, I could use this. There's a few different places I can run it, but I would then need to be able to modify the SQL in order to add additional columns here. So I can say d.tags, which is the tags column name in the device view, and add that. And then once I've added and saved that, I can then use that within the report. Now you can see after I've clicked OK and saved with that additional column, I now have that available as a field here. So I can then add column after here and set tags, add the header and formatting that I want to that report. And of course I can copy and add any filtering and fill that I might need as is relevant. All right, so we just talked about using DOQL natively within the advanced reports and how you could use that to define advanced report, even create them and modify the columns. But let's talk about if I want to use DOQL outside of the advanced reporting engine. So this can be found in tools, integrations, and save DOQL queries. And if you haven't used DOQL before, you'll notice in Save DOQL there should be a few system-defined queries highlighted in check marks depending on different integrations that you use or if you're using affinity groups. And these are just used in different backend processes of Device42. So they're not typically going to be designed as running reports or extracts, but it is some SQL you can modify to change some of the calculations and how affinity groups are being created and so on as needed. But this is really a runtime window where you can take your own SQL and create reports or even programmatic endpoints for any data of device 42. So a few places to be aware of before you start creating these is within the help menu at the top here, viewer schema, you'll find our ERD and data dictionary. So let's go ahead and open up the data dictionary. And I'll have read-only views of all data objects inside of device 42. So let's go to the device view, go view device v1, and this is really a table of a lot of the key information of our devices. So we'll go ahead and use this to create a quick report on some of the device inventory that we have in the system. So I'll go back to our save DOQL, and it's going to be device CPU and OS and tags. That's going to be our name for that. So I'll follow just the common SQL syntax is what we're using here. And I can say that this is going to be D for our alias, and then the column name, and I'm going to use the name, which is the device name in that view. I'm going to add quotes here, say that what that column is for. I'll go along and add the rest of my columns. All right, and then I'm going to say what view that is from. So this was, of course, from view device v1 and our alias. All right, and I want to order by the device ID. So I could say device d.devicepk here. Cool. Now that I have that SQL set, that's what I liked, and build that report, I can go ahead and save and run that. And when I save it, there's a few different options. So I can add tags. If there's just different metadata I want to say that this is for, or notes on what the purpose of this DOQL is going to be used for, as well as different output formats as default options, which I can always change later. So if I'm generally going to be using this as a CSV, or maybe it's going to be a web endpoint that is pulled programmatically, and that source that is pulling it is going to need that data in JSON. And whether I want to include headers or not, because if it is being used programmatically, we may not need the headers. I'm just going to leave it as default for now. I'll do save and continue editing. And it's actually going to do a check on the syntax. If there was a column that was invalid or doesn't exist, it's going to return an error for that. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll go back to our data dictionary and I'll validate OS name column. Maybe I have a typo there and I'm missing something. And this is where I can go ahead and validate that. So I can actually notice OS name, I need an underscore. And I'll go ahead and throw that in there. And let's save that again. There we go. So now SQL all works. I can even do a test of the SQL here. Query is valid. And switch to view. It then gives me a query URL where I can then see a few options in there. So in that URL, it actually sets the delimiter as comma, header equals yes, output type CSV. So I could always copy that URL and then modify those if I want those settings to be different at the time I'm running it. In this case, I can just click on that and it's going to give me a report of that extract. And then we can see the data and columns available that we selected for. So that's a relatively simple SQL query. If you aren't fluent in SQL, and by no means when I started was I too fluent in SQL and using DOQL and I built the knowledge from there, what can help is using our GitHub. And I'll go ahead and share the address for that in the video in a moment. But on our GitHub, there's a few different places. You'll find a lot of open source integrations here. But if I search for DOQL and DOQL scripts examples, this will tell you about using these DOQL files. They can be ran as scripts, or you can just go into the examples and click on the JSON and then copy them. So here's actually the databases DOQL that we use in that previous report. And I can select this and just copy the select statement and save that as a new DOQL. So I can create a new DOQL from that example, modify it if I need, or just use it as is. So there are some examples to help you build different queries and reports and understand how DOQL could be used further, or get some example data rather than starting from scratch as needed.